8 House Republicans standing by their votes to remove Kevin McCarthy as House Speaker and grind congressional business to a halt.
Yeah, the current interim Speaker can perform functions, although they're limited functions. They can call a recess, adjournment, and then also preside over the vote for a new permanent Speaker. Legislation, though, that can't go anywhere. With a new deadline to fund the federal government a little more than 6 weeks away now, even some Senate Republicans are concerned about the lower chamber.
To my colleagues in the House, follow your heart, but take your brain with you.
So a vote on a new speaker is at least 1 week away, and some House Republicans don't want to see it drawn out. There's a lot at play here. So we welcome in Adrian Hemond. He's from Grassroots Midwest to break down what comes next for the Speaker of the House. Adrian, thanks for coming on with us.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Yeah, we have been through now 55 people who have served as House Speaker. None of them, until now, have been removed with a vote. So what stands out to you most about this uncharted territory that we now find ourselves in once again as a country?
Well, I think most people know that we have a very closely divided Congress, but I don't think people necessarily understand how divided the Republican conference is in Washington, D.C. We saw that play out with this vote. That division within the Republican conference is going to continue and doesn't bode particularly well for a lot of what's coming in the future, whether it's a potential government shutdown right before Thanksgiving or a number of other things. But that's really the thing to keep an eye on here. Former Speaker McCarthy did a masterful job after a lot of votes of bringing that conference together with him as the candidate that could bring them all together to organize the House and try to pass legislation. With that gone, it's not clear who can step up and command the votes needed to become Speaker.
Adrian, almost immediately after this happened, there was a questions asked about the perspective from the outside looking in. What's the world view from people looking at the chaos happening in our U.S. Capitol? And I understand that it's oftentimes important for politics to keep a positive viewpoint on American government. But why does that matter? What's the implications of changes like this within our government on the world scale?
Well, the political economy is no different from the regular economy in that people who participate want stability, right? They don't like uncertainty. And we've gotten a big dose of uncertainty in Washington, D.C. The possibility of a government shutdown, of not passing these spending bills before Thanksgiving, doesn't just impact us. It impacts our geopolitical allies. It impacts people like, the folks fighting in Ukraine. It impacts our trading partners. There's a lot that goes into these federal spending bills and budgets. They reset the clock right before Speaker McCarthy was ousted, but they still have to pass these annual spending bills. And the House isn't even organized to pass legislation right now. That's not a great look for our friends and allies. It's not a great look for our adversaries in the world either, who can only see opportunity in the dysfunction that's going on in Washington, D.C. right now.
Just when we thought we finally received some good news when Congress was able to avoid a government shutdown, the very next day, this happens. It just seems like a never-ending cycle on Capitol Hill. But let's try to find the silver lining here, at least moving forward. What do you think would be the best case scenario as this all plays out?
The best case scenario is that the House Republican Conference is able to organize itself and elect a speaker on Wednesday next week. I'm not super optimistic based on how the last 48 hours have gone that that's going to be the case, but they still have an opportunity to do that, right? They've got about a week to figure out who can command the votes of the House Republican Conference and become Speaker of the House. If they can pull that off by Wednesday next week, then that gives them a solid month to try and negotiate these must-pass spending bills before we're on the precipice of a shutdown again. So the best case scenario in this case isn't super rosy. It's a return to business as usual. And I think that that's the best that Americans can hope for right now. Once we get past those must-pass spending bills, then you might look for some improvement. But right now, we're just trying to keep the lights on.
I'm wondering where the faith in that process is coming from and how you're encouraged moving forward, considering how the vote to elect Kevin McCarthy went, and now looking ahead to the next person and how we might be able to expedite that process, considering what we've been through in the last year.
I mean, that's why I say that I'm not confident that House Republicans can pull this off. They have an opportunity to do so between now and a week from today, but it took quite a while for Kevin McCarthy to get himself elected Speaker because of that fractured GOP conference that I mentioned. And the conference has not become less fractured. If anything, it's become more fractured now that they've had this very public repudiation of the man that they elected Speaker just in January. So I'm not super optimistic that they'll be able to pull this off, but they really need to. And the longer this goes on beyond Wednesday of next week, the more of the clock is being burned up on a leadership election internally for House Republicans instead of the full Congress doing the people's business and passing these must-pass bills like the National Defense Authorization Act, like the Farm Bill, that Americans, our allies, and people around the world have come to rely on us doing timely.
Yeah, it's hard. I think doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. I feel like it's hard for anyone to find optimism in this process right now, but we'll find out very shortly if there can be some sort of something that helps us be excited about the future. The new vote comes in a week. We'll see how long that process takes and who it ends up being. In the meantime, Adrian, thank you for joining us. And I imagine we'll speak with you again at some point in the future once this all kind of dust settles from this whole process.
Thanks a lot for having me.